and I don't care who they are, no matter what role they play. Because once I realized that I was relying on that one individual and the pressure on that one individual was creating opportunity for mistake, having those smaller voices saying, this is what I'm seeing. It was the diversity of the ear, just listening, because we all hear different things. Certain things are elevated to us as we're listening, and hearing the variety of voices repeating back things that I didn't hear, right? Allowed me to make a more informed decision, allowed us to literally say, this is what I'm hearing. Everybody, what did you hear that's different from what I just said? And that was the beginning of the change. And that's why I could take someone who had a lesser role and push them in, because every time they kept having the answer that would allow that perspective that made all the difference. And so as a leader, you must consider every voice, regardless of title, regardless of position, because we all hear different things. And without that variety of listening and then the translation of what you've heard, you can easily miss something simple that will be extremely expensive.
Welcome to the How to Not Execute Your Strategy podcast. I'm your host, Tim Ojai. This podcast is dedicated to the biggest lessons learned from the people who own strategic execution, the senior leaders who live in the center of it. My guest today is Dr. Towanna Burrous, founder and president of CoachDiversity Institute. See the show notes for more information about Towanna and to also get access to the leader guide for this episode. Let's get to it. Towanna, it is so nice to have you on the show today. I am excited about our conversation, and I genuinely look forward to learning more about you and your experience in leading a hypergrowth company. Literally, you started with nothing, if I understand right, and you've grown it into being recognized nationally and all the other things. So let's just get to it. The first question we ask everybody is, tell us about a time when you had a strategy that did not go as planned. What did you learn from it?
Well, entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. Right?
Oh,
we think that other people's experience could be your experience, etc., and you get advice from everywhere. Okay, so down to the bottom of the barrel, for me, it was always the timing of growth when it comes to tools. And what happened was I was super confident that the timing was right. We had the capital, so we could make the investment. And we were in our happy year because money was great. And when you're in your happy year, you can spend money. So one of the
especially if the year before wasn't as good, you're like, we are having steak every night this week, or we're going to take that trip because we haven't had a vacation in 2 years or whatever. Yeah.
I tell you, so I've been on the slow growth, of course, but when you have consistent growth and you can say, okay, for the last 2 years, we've seen consistent, last 3 years, there's been consistency. Now it's time. Okay. Now the timing of it was right as COVID was in the beginning phases. And so everyone's a little standstillish, but we were also trying to figure out, is this the season to plan, to make some changes? We all went through several adjustments, and technology was on top of the list. We're going virtual. What do we need? What are we missing? So in that season, we were trying to find a way to fill in the gap for some of our communications with our clients, as well as some of the students who come through our school. And we wanted to improve communication so that we can reconnect them to us during the COVID season. And in doing that, it was like, okay, so we need an app. We need an app to communicate. And who knew that you had to decide it was going to be an iOS or Android app? That it could be cost prohibitive for every update and version. Who knew that you had to have, now this is in the seasons where everyone was, I can build an app, but when you want all the bells and whistles, when you need chat, when you need video, the features grow, right? And you want the Cadillac version, of course you do, of any. Yeah. So for me, it was, thankfully, I caught myself before we made the investment. But the problem is we wasted time. We ended up making a smaller step in the direction that we planned it, we did it, and it doesn't function the way it should. And it's cost us over the years, because now that people have converted to this particular system, we're going to hold steady for a little while until something better happens, right? And you started to realize that now that we have made this investment, we can't afford to make another investment. But then here comes the other shiny toy. Okay, what other thing do we need? Again, in the space of software and in the space of apps, our CRM. What do we need that's different for our customer relationship models? Like, how do we do a better job communicating, managing the sales pipeline, making sure that we are staying on top of that communication strategy? And so we've been with one particular provider for over 15 years. Moving to another one, the expense of it all to do a reset. It's always been around growth in technology. That is that's the hardest lessons to learn.
Let me jump in, because you've talked about a couple things that I want to explore a little further. And the first one is, you're in a situation, and a lot of the stories we're getting are about COVID because it was so disruptive. It's a historical moment. But just dealing with ambiguity, there's so much confusion around what's happening. And not just what's happening now, but now we thought next year is going to look like X. I don't know anybody who thinks they have any level of confidence around 2024. Going into this right now at the end, we're here at the end of 2023, and no one, not like, oh, next year we expect to do this, we'll probably grow by 7% or by 20% or whatever the number is. So you have this ambiguity, but then on top of it, you had, it sounds like, a conviction that whatever we do, it's going to invest in stronger connection to our customers, our client base, and our community, really, so that we know that whatever we do, we know we have to connect with them. Is that a good summary of those 2 points?
Absolutely. And what sexy, shiny toy are we going to use to make that happen?
That's the big part here. So now we're clear about our context, chaos. We're clear about our destination, community and connection. How do we get there? There's 1,000,001 paths, and they all sound good. And you start on one path, it doesn't go as smoothly as you intended. Maybe we should be on another path, or maybe we should just stick to it, or maybe we just pull out, the machetes and just start cutting grass and just keep hacking through the jungle. Go back to that moment. And you're talking with your leadership team, you're talking with your trusted advisors. I'm assuming you have mentors as well. What was the dialogue about? How were you trying to figure this out? Because every leader has been at this place.
So I was relying on other people to do the due diligence that would allow me to make an informed decision at the end. I wasn't as confident, of course, at this point. I know now what I didn't know. And that is that they did not have the skill set to analyze the tools in the way I would have done it. At the same time, trusting them in that way, doing a comparison, still finding out that there were holes in the evaluation process. So a lot of time spent, a lot of eyeballs paying attention to a lot of different things, and then getting all the quotes, spending money in small increments at a time, hoping that we were going to get to this solution, hiring consultants to analyze and do all that stuff. Money is going. I can tell you that my advisors, once they gave me a budget, they said, okay, when you get to this dollar amount, you know that you're down the wrong path. Okay. I was trusting my people that we wouldn't get to that point. That's where I made the wrong turn. The lesson I learned now being an owner and being truly a little too distant for operations, not having the qualified person in the operation space that would allow for that type of analysis. And so I pulled out before it got too costly, but it still was an expense that I did not need.
So I want to camp here a little longer as well, because it's especially for those of us who just are people. We enjoy relationship. We enjoy people. We want things to be fun and friendly and exciting and all the other stuff. It's easy for us to rely on the trust button. And just, I'll trust you. I want to be that leader. And then on the other hand, I'll speak for myself, but the control freak is alive and well. So you're like, I've got these expectations of how it's supposed to be, and I can trust you. But I find the big gap in my own leadership is if clarity is not injected, if clarity is not the bridge, you have this canyon between your desire to trust and empower your people and your expectation of what that success is supposed to look like. If we haven't defined it very, very, and I mean down to the detail, then it's really our fault. Would you agree that that was part of your lesson? Like, I needed to be clearer on my expectations, my metrics and my requirements, all of that stuff you were looking for? Or was it something else?
Yeah, it was that 100%. I agree with that. And then it was also hiring talent that presented well in resume, spoke educated, but really didn't understand the numbers, really didn't understand the science, really didn't understand how to get us where we needed. I call it scope creep in project management world, not defining the project and the milestones, the journey of not understanding the skills that are needed in that role, skills that I come with that I assumed in that moment they would come with as well. There's not enough time to check all those boxes. And again, I work with leaders all the time around individuals that sell themselves in one way and fall short in another, right? Great leaders have all experienced that at some point. You just hope that it doesn't cost you too much money. But that was a part of it. It was me not having a close enough bird's eye view over it, and then having individuals who really truly weren't qualified that could help us make a better decision. And those were the two parts that was the most important.
In the model that I use and I teach, we start with clarity and then immediately it's empowerment. When we talk about empowerment, there's 4 assets you can use. You've got people, you've got time, you've got energy, and you've got resources. And resources can be budget, can be technology, can even be space like physical location, etc. You've already spent a lot of time on the people part. Having the wrong people, or if you could have made advisors available to the team you had, could they have executed better if they had somebody they could go to who had the expertise that you didn't, because you didn't even know the difference between the Apple platform and the decisions that that would create versus the Android platform and that would create.
Yeah.
If you had people access, would that have changed the execution? Would it have literally needed different people to do the
I
work?
needed different people altogether. Sometimes, again, the way technology has advanced, you don't know sometimes what is needed and necessary as far as skill
Right.
sets and understanding. And so for
Right.
me, like I said, I had moved out of that space of and time of my life where I was so excited about technology and I studied it that I knew what to look for if I were in that space and position. And the biggest thing you can make is the assumption, because the assumptions are extremely expensive. The
Yeah.
outcomes would have been the same. I needed someone different altogether.
I'm having a little aha moment. We can even have a really good expectation of what we want, but that doesn't mean we're not going to get smarter 3 months, 6 months down the road. And all of a sudden, a skill set we had no idea that was necessary is suddenly critical.
Yep.
And if we're going to keep this thing on track, let's assume it is going the way it's supposed to, we have to have a flexible view or perspective, yeah,
That,
on that people side of this. Okay, let's talk about time. You talked about you didn't have enough time. Did the team have enough time? What could you have done that would have changed the time aspect of how this was done? Would you have pulled the plug sooner? What comes to mind when I ask that?
Tim, there's so many things that are coming to mind regarding things in the last 3 years that have gone wrong, right? And that I celebrate and have learned from. As far as time is concerned, not having the right people at the table cost us a lot of time. I do take ownership for all of those things. And again, this is a pattern. Okay, so Tim, I can think of several things over the last 3 years that I can isolate and see a pattern or theme. Theme is not
Yeah.
having the right people at the table and trusting individuals to do certain things. All the things you've just named, but I absolutely concur that I would have saved time with just that one tweak. And again, it's catching it immediately. It's almost like your sixth sense or your intuition kicking in. It's like, I kind of feel that now is the time to put this to rest. But I'm going to give you one more month or one more of something else. Again, that's that grace, that
Yeah.
trust. Ends up costing. Without all of this, I wouldn't be where I am in this moment, right? As far as growth is
Right.
complete lesson that I welcome. But I tell you that even after having the lessons and sharing my advice with other people, they all have to still experience it on their own. I can tell you over and over again,
That's right.
don't do this. They'll do it anyway. Every leader has to experience
That's
their
right.
own.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. Back to the checklist, the energy thing we've been talking about, trust, we've been talking about grace, patience, and to a degree, impatience. Is there any other energy aspects that you would have wanted to inject or would inject differently in your strategies as you move forward now?
I can say that obviously relying on my old program management background as a PMP, you already know these things, right?
Mm,
It is not ignoring the small voice on the team that could see the challenge and their small voice, or that one thing they mentioned that you heard, but you didn't pull the thread on it and go, you know what, tell me more about that. Share some more. Because in the end, when it comes down to all of this, what I ended up doing was finding someone else with the skill set that I was missing and needed to come in and turn the whole ship around, get us back on schedule, stop the bleeding in the money space, and remove team members that were no longer serving the project and get us to that deadline, right? It was the small addition to the team that turned the ship around. It wasn't the person with the title, the person with the master's degree. It was the person who had the skill that was missing. That's the end of it. And they have none of those things that pre-qualified them for that voice. And I think that was the biggest part of it that I really appreciated.
It's an interesting comment because I will say big organizations have a tendency to only listen to the senior executives, because if you're leading, your level of separation from people living at the front lines or at street level, there's so much distance. It's hard for you to know what's really going on. So you rely on your team, the people who are closest to you. But if there's filtering going on, that's one thing. But you were able to see things. That's part of why you're the leader. You see things others might miss, and you can like, oh, you mentioned pull the thread or ask more questions. Hey, if you're enjoying this conversation, I want to encourage you to go to timohai.com/blog now and get the leader guide. It's an awesome way to allow me to both coach you personally through deeper reflection and to also open up the dialogue with your team. All right, back to the interview. It reminds me of a story of Sam Walton, who founded Walmart. His routine was he would go out every day, fly around the country, and spend the first part of the day in the local stores. And he would start actually at the distribution centers, and he would jump in the truck with the truck driver every morning. And he rode around with the truck drivers, and they'd be like, Mr. Sam, let me tell you about store number 43999 or whatever. And he would tell me more. And then they would go to store number 43999. Then he would walk around, he would talk to people. And he would actually tell the store managers, hey, I need a moment with people, just talking to people. And he was this old Southern kind of gentleman, but aw shucks, and talking to folks. And they would tell him, hey, here's what's going on. And then he would go pull the leader aside and say, I need to talk to you. Your people are telling me this. Help me understand. But then he would coach. The stories I've heard from people who knew him was he was actually an amazing CEO, considering opposite of that would be the ivory tower far away. Mm-hmm. When you think about what it takes to be able to do that successfully, I know enough of you to know you bring a lot to that just intuitively. But if you break that down just a little bit for leaders who want to be able to engage the front lines in a way that's not intimidating, that's transparent, that's, how do I say this, courageous, so that people can speak freely, but at the same time, you got to filter, because some people will just complain because you're the leader and they just want to tell you. What would you advise those leaders to think about and do?
And this is exactly what I do. I ask, this is what I'm hearing. What are you hearing that could be different from what I just repeat? I clearly articulate what I'm hearing, and everybody in the room is sharing what they perceive and or what they heard. And every voice shares, and I don't care who they are, no matter what role they play. Because once I realized that I was relying on that one individual and the pressure on that one individual was creating opportunity for mistake, having those smaller voices saying, this is what I'm seeing. It was the diversity of the ear, just listening, because we all hear different things. Certain things are elevated to us as we're listening, and hearing the variety of voices, repeating back things that I didn't hear, right, allowed me to make a more informed decision, allowed us to literally say, this is what I'm hearing. Everybody, what did you hear that's different from what I just said? And that was the beginning of the change. And that's why I could take someone who had a lesser role and push them in, because every time they kept having the answer that would allow that perspective that made all the difference. And so as a leader, you must consider every voice, regardless of title, regardless of position, because we all hear different things. And without that variety of listening and then the translation of what you've heard, you can easily miss something simple that will be extremely expensive.
Wow, that is huge. Anybody listening to this, I'm going to give double thumbs up. That is so profoundly simple and yet so profoundly effective because it cuts through all the stuff we talked about. Then it goes back to, do you have a culture where people can speak freely? But to be blunt, if that's your problem, none of things we're talking about are going to help.
The gift that I gave myself to remind myself, because I tell my leaders this all the time, you don't have to be right. You don't have to be right all the time as you're leading your companies or as you're leading your teams. What you need to be is open to being wrong and allowing, again, those voices. Once I actually put into practice something that I actually teach, it became the answer from my moment. But again, sometimes we're hugging the tree. We're a little too close. I literally missed this. This is so simple. Why didn't you fix this sooner? But then you have to be reminded sometimes of what it really means to be a great leader. And you have to be reminded and tested. And that was my test. And I accept it. Now, moving forward, that is a consistent habit. Every time, a consistent habit. Everyone knows that you can push back and challenge Towanna. Push back and challenge anything that you heard her say that is still open, meaning a decision has not been made. We're still in design phase or we're still gathering information. During that phase of any project, push back. And because they have that permission, we can solve problems better.
That's so good. So I'm going to summarize what I'm hearing. So there's a couple of things. One, I love what you said about that willingness to be wrong, that openness to being wrong. And you talked about giving people the authorization to challenge. But the other thing I heard you say was you allowed your leaders access to how you think so that they could then tell people it's okay to challenge the boss. It's okay to push up. That's how we do what we do.
Right.
And it wasn't just coming out of your mouth, it was out of their mouth. So I would imagine if I'm, new to the team and I'm just learning how things work around here, and my boss says, yeah, you can challenge Towanna, and then Towanna shows up and says, you can challenge me, that means something. That creates a different kind of information flow and decision making. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Because me inviting you to share your perspective, to share your voice, empowers everyone. But I prove it's easy to see how quickly decisions can be made. All the new members of our team, whenever we onboard new people, that is the one thing that they kind of hesitate to do because they're not used to that type of culture. So when I say, please push back, they tense up and like, are you sure? Like, no, I won't do that. I tell them, I said, okay, here's the rules. Yes, you can challenge me when we're in design phase or we're in discovery phase. Okay. But after that, that whatever you challenge means you missed the opportunity to correct and now we're in trouble. Okay. So let's know timing is everything. The other thing is you never tell the leader what they can't do. So it's also, you're thinking that when you're sharing, you're telling me you can't, you're not allowed. That's not a good idea. Those aren't words you use with someone who is the president of the company and or your leader. You never tell them what they can't do because anyone that is in leadership, they will challenge that idea that they can't because I'm a problem solver. You tell me I can't do something, I'm going to prove you wrong or try to prove you wrong. And that's a time waster because then we're going around in circles regarding who is going to have the last voice in this moment. I tell them those are the rules. Other than that, push back. And once those conditions are understood, we're able to get the job done. Again, I'm a problem solver. I'm a scientist. Are you kidding me? I'm going to test until I get 3 nines.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, we've got just a few minutes left, and I want to just take everything we've been talking about, different attributes that everybody should have, not only as a leader, but also the team. I want to give you a chance to highlight, let's just say 2 things that everybody in the organization should have in order to do what we've been talking about, in order to make great decisions, in order to have confidence that they can speak up and do it in a way that's influential and effective, in order to create an atmosphere, a culture as a leader, even at mid-tier or mid-level, as we like to say, where you're kind of the in between the strategic executive view and the frontline getting stuff done view. What are 2 more attributes that you think every single person in the organization should have in order to execute really, really well?
Yeah, I think everything we've stated so far is consistent to, for most leaders. So I'm going to pepper in something new. One of my favorites is suspending judgment. being in a space where there's reduced or non-judgment. And the reason non-judgment is important, especially when you're the leader, is because people need to feel that they won't be judged by their contributions or their lack of clarity or something. I want everyone to feel empowered that there's no such thing as a bad comment or the non-judgment workspace. The other thing is making sure that you understand that there's no reason to be right all the time. That level of vulnerability does not mean you're not a powerful leader, a strong leader, or a confident leader. It just means that you are willing and open to have contributions from all the voices, and that you're ultimately going to make the final decision. You're just wanting to make the best or most informed decision. And without those two things, the suspending judgment and the vulnerability, you're still going to have holes that need to be filled.
Let's take a moment on this suspending judgment. What I hear you saying is it's less about defining good, bad, and more about just tell me more.
That's right.
Tell me more.
That's
right? Okay.
That's right.
Are there any specific questions we can ask or any specific mindsets we should have in order to make sure everybody has that perspective?
Yeah. So the number one question I start off with, this is what I heard. I need all voices. What am I missing? Or what did you hear that's different from what I have articulated?
Oh,
That's
yeah,
the first one. After that, every other question is open-ended and allows for contribution. There's really no order, but that's the first question I start with that creates opportunity for discussion.
Beautiful. And then on the second thing of really making sure that you're allowing things to, I'm going to use the word organically, reveal themselves and grow. What are the things or either questions or skills that you have people do in order to get that energy generated?
I start with reminding everyone, I don't have a need to be right in this moment. There have been times in the past where we've made quick decisions and we've, in some cases, regretted moving too quickly. Let's pause for a minute and allow everyone to know that there's no one right way to do this in this moment. So every contribution matters. Please dial in, because I'm not the answer in this moment.
And then do you ever have to correct people on that dialogue and make sure that they're genuinely getting it? Or do people more or less just trust and run with it?
Yeah, the new people observe the cadence. They observe it. They say, okay, so that's how we do things around here. There are individuals who, even after you've explained it, they have a need to be right. They have a need to perform. They have a need to set a standard of excellence to preposition them to being the resource. That's going to get you in trouble in that environment, because the moment that you're not willing to be wrong, you're going to hold on and defend your thoughts so much so that no one wants to communicate with you. And that's what you observe. You observe them holding on to that truth, so you're not willing to be wrong at this moment, and that creates tension in the team. And so that's evidence of that lack of vulnerability, or as you say, that organic support, is when someone is highly resistant to being open and being vulnerable and not being right. That's when you know you're in trouble.
That's so good. That was an excellent breakdown. I really do appreciate you giving us that extra kind of flavor, because it makes the bite even that much better. Towanna, thank you so much. It's been a delightful conversation. I'm grateful for your time, but also you guys who say in Hawaii, your mana'o, your wisdom from experience to help us understand how to execute better. And I appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much, Tim. It's been great.
I hope you enjoyed that episode and have some solid takeaways. Here are 3 that I want to highlight. 1, identifying gaps in your people dependencies will dramatically impact the amount of time you have to execute. If you don't address people gaps, you will create time gaps. 2, give your leaders access to what you are thinking so that they can listen for challenges to your thinking. This eliminates the limitation of you being the only person who can identify challenges. 3, suspending judgment and being vulnerable will make you the kind of leader who is assured of getting the information that you will need to make great decisions. Do not allow the need to be right become larger than the decision that needs to be made. The moment you're not willing to be wrong is the moment people will stop sharing what they really think with you. If you enjoyed this episode, there are 3 things that I would ask of you. First, please share it with at least one person. Second, hit those rating stars on whatever platform you downloaded this podcast. When you do that, it raises the visibility of what we are talking about to people just like you. Third, follow me on LinkedIn and Meta, especially on Instagram at Tim_Ohai. You'll get even more content that will both challenge and inspire you. Holomua. Onward and upward.